An enemy tier list. No bosses here, just the regular enemies, and they will be covered in groups, so I don't have to cover like 100 different monsters. None of us want that. That is too much work, and it's too tedious. Like, every small hilly churl can just be in one category, hilly churl. There will, of course, be some splits, and you'll see it as the list goes on, so let's just get right into it. Starting with the Clockwork Mechas. These guys basically serve as the Fatui, not the Fatui, they serve as the Eremites, or the, God, why am I forgetting, the Nobushi of the Fontaine region. They have a refreshing variety for a common enemy. You got the Ruin Hunter wannabe, Humanoid 1, Dog, Tire, Robot that likely has way too much inappropriate fan art. Then you got these things, which you probably forget are even enemies and look more like scenery, but then you kill them and they give drops, and you're like, oh, I guess it was an enemy. In any case, the Clockwork Mechas are cool and they are pretty refreshing for a common enemy, but nothing really stand out about them, so I'm gonna put them in B. Sisson Mages, one of the oldest enemy types. They have a lovely design and a somewhat interesting moveset, but the problem is the Sisson's a summon serves to highlight the massive dislike I have for the auto-targeting in this game. You can try to say, oh, they're illusionists, they're trying to throw you off and like be tricky. Don't try to make excuses for this. If they were just physically blocking attacks, that's totally fine. But nope, they are aided by the horrible auto-targeting system. For that, I give them a C. Breacher Primus, a new enemy to Fontaine with a lot of promise, and much like an enemy further down the line, the Fatui Pyro Agent, this thing has cool attacks that you just never see because of how quickly they die. Between overworld enemies all being Mr. Glass and the Spiral Abyss encouraging you to kill everything as quickly as possible, you just don't get to see the mechanics of these things really shine. Very neat concept for an enemy, and they were pretty refreshing to see, but as time has gone on, my opinion of them has soured a little bit, and I just wish they got to do what they do before they fell apart. I'm gonna put these down in C. Black Serpents, one of the most underutilized enemies in all of Genshin Impact. We only really get to see them in the Chasm in the overworld, and in the Spiral Abyss they are used rather sparingly. You would think as one of the few enemies that actually attempt to counter shield mechanics from the player, that they would want to use them a little bit more and encourage us to go towards healing. In any case, these guys have very slow, very easily dodgeable, but powerful attacks. I love their simple but cool design, and the Rock Breaker Axe enemy, which we've only seen in the Spiral Abyss to my knowledge, I'm pretty sure, is one of the coolest enemies in this entire game. The Rockbreaker Axe one really carries this whole group, but I really do like them all, and they're going in S. The Abyss Mages, iconic. Very simple enemies with very powerful yet very counterable mechanics. And most importantly, not overly punitive if you don't bring the proper element to counter them. They have very simple designs, but they're also just incredibly good looking. Now they may look like recolors of each other, and that may be a little bit of a weak point, but regardless, they are great enemies, and they're going in B. Heralds and Lectors. These can be incredibly contentious enemies. Creating some of the most difficult Spiral Abysses we've ever had due to their elemental restrictions, these can be very frustrating for people, and I understand why a lot of people wouldn't like them. What I appreciate from these enemies is that they value a different thing than just insane amounts of damage. All of a sudden it becomes about elemental gauge theory and just how well you know about applying different elements. Want to take a Thundering Fury Bennett and just whack them with this little fire stick until their shield explodes? You can do that. And look, I understand that these can be annoying. We have all been annoyed by these enemies, but that doesn't stop me from liking them, so I'm putting them in A. Whopper Flowers. Oh my god. As much as I love the design and the concept behind these little guys, they just kind of suck, man. Like, I don't want an enemy that teleports all over the place, has an elemental shield, resists all kinds of damage an insane amount, and isn't even threatening. They're just annoying. But they do look cool. I do like the way they look, so they can go in D. Treasure Hoarders. These guys suck. Piddly-ass enemies that never really amount to any major threat. All they do is they just cram floors 9 to 11 of the Spiral Abyss with these little guys, and they just spread out in giant circles and make it go around, bopping each one by one. They suck. Down to the bottom F tier with them. Spectres. We all know where they're going, where they belong. F tier. They hover around, they don't like to group up, even after they've been nerfed. Well, they're a lot less annoying than they used to be, but they're still not fun to fight, and they're just, ugh. Slimes, an iconic enemy, a basic enemy, one that's a staple in most RPGs. Genshin slimes are pretty cute, they come in a variety of elements, and that is where my biggest pain point about them comes from is the elemental immunity, a mechanic that I'm generally very strongly against in video games, no matter how much sense it may make. I just don't like it, but I still love slimes. Cute little bastards. They're in the abyss just enough for you to say like, hey, maybe I shouldn't bring Morgana to this side because it's like half cryo slimes, and that part does kind of suck. I'm just gonna put them in C tier. Ruin Sentinels, a small group of enemies with a little bit of variety in them, but most of these just kinda die and don't really do anything, which honestly probably for the better, because they were really used a lot in Inazuma and even in the Chasm and a lot of places. I may not have disliked them at first, but I have certainly grown very tired of them at this point. They can go down in D. Ruin Hunters, absolutely amazing enemies until they fly up into the air and you can't hit them anymore. I don't particularly like being forced to have a bow character in my party deal with these should they fly up into the air. Now they don't always, but it's not that hard to provoke, especially when you have a character like Kazuha that jumps up in the air, and sometimes they see that as a challenge. This isn't the kind of counterplay I want, so they can go down in D as well. They're fine in the overworld, but in the abyss, I do not want to see these things. Ruin Guards, on the other hand, absolutely amazing. One of the most iconic enemies in all of Genshin Impact, thanks to the fact that, well, they were pretty much the strongest thing in the game for quite a while. They've even been involved in storylines and whatnot, but what I like about them is the fact that their attacks are extremely well telegraphed, but they deal good damage, making them exceptionally fair and satisfying to fight, plus they profusely bleed energy when you attack them. Very solid enemy, even though it's been outclassed by a lot of things since then. They're still going up in A. Speaking of being outclassed, we got the Ruin Grader next. Everything I said about the Ruin Grader applies to the Ruin... everything I said apply... God damn it. Everything I said about the Ruin Guard applies to the Ruin Grader and then some. These hulking machines tower over us. They have giant, powerful attacks. They are so satisfying to fight, and I wish they would put more of them in the world. They're going to S. Ruin Drakes. What is not to love about some robotic dinosaurs or dragons, whatever you want to call them? They're cool, and while one of them may fly like the Ruin Hunter, somehow it still manages to be attackable from the ground for most characters. Now, that may not be for everybody, but in my experience, they are not nearly as annoying to fight as a Ruin Hunter is, so they can go up an A with the Ruin Guards. Rift Hounds, another incredibly controversial enemy. Being the premier counter to shields for the most part, these are one of the most important enemies they've ever created, and they refuse to utilize them to their fullest potential. Their design is beyond cool. I love wolves. Who doesn't love wolves? But more importantly, they served a real purpose of getting people to just move off of Zhongli. And while they may have found better, more creative, less frustrating ways to move people towards healing, I still think they served a very important purpose and still do. And honestly, I love some of the abyss floors that just have like 20 of these in one room. Yeah, sure, some people may find it frustrating, but I don't care. This is my list. This is my opinion. I don't find them frustrating. I love them. They're going up an S. Bathysimal Vishaps. Now I can save some time on the little blurb about all the Vishaps that are coming up on this tier list. Why do they have the same poise as a small hilly churl? When I'm fighting a giant enemy like this, the last thing I want them to do is fly backwards when they get a light hit like it's a slapstick comedy. It's a small complaint, but it really annoys the hell out of me when I'm fighting these things. Absolutely impeccable design though. Visually, they're beautiful. Even mechanically, not too bad. The energy drain, yeah, it can have its moments where it's frustrating, but I think that is a good mechanic. Seriously though, give these some poise. They're going in B tier. Primal Constructs, or Cool Ranch flavor of Doritos. These things are just ruined sentinels with not even attitude. They're kind of boring. At least they're not that annoying. They can go see. Hydro Phantasms. Straight up, I'm gonna tell you, you can call me a hypocrite on this one all you want. I don't care. I ragged on slimes for having elemental immunities, and these things are immune to my favorite element, Hydro. Yet, I still love them. I love these things. They're tanky. They're dangerous. They have good dodgeable mechanics. I think these things are one of the better enemies in all of Fontaine, and I think people are gonna call me crazy for that, because I imagine these guys are probably pretty hated. I myself get annoyed when it forces me to switch off Nouvelette, who I am pretty much fully addicted to at this point. I like them this much despite being immune to elements, not because of it. They would be even better if they were immune to nothing. Regardless, they're still going in S. Nobushi, and yeah, this is covering both the small ones and the big ones. Small Nobushi, yeah, they're cool. There's a little bit of variety there, but mostly they're all just gonna come swing swords at you and just die doing not a lot. Large Nobushi, on the other hand, have been a favorite of Hoyo's to put in various spiral abysses. Their revenge mechanic, where they get a buff when the other counterpart dies because they often come in pairs, is a rather unique one to have among regular enemies. Combine that with the fact that they actually do have a lot of threatening attacks that once again are very fairly dodgeable, makes them pretty good enemies. Their blocking mechanic, on the other hand, yeah, I'm not a fan of that one. Very solid enemies overall, does nothing super stand out, so they're gonna go in the B tier. Next is Mirror Maidens. They may have a beautiful design and some stunning particle effects on their attacks, but they are more often than not really annoying to fight thanks to their imprisonment and their rapid teleportation. In this case, the cons of fighting them just outweighs any design aspect of them way too much. C tier for them. Law Churls. Earlier when I said that Ruin Guards were the most powerful enemies in 1.0, that was only because they come in an island of 4 that a lot of people consider difficult. Law Churls were definitely the single strongest enemy. More importantly than that, they're just fairly designed. Well telegraphed attacks that can be threatening, but are very easily dodgeable. Not to mention the fact that they are just hulking monstrosities and you can feel the power behind their attacks. I'm only sad that we haven't gotten more of them, because these remain to be one of my favorite enemies. Up into the S tier for them. Hilly Churl. what could you possibly say about these guys? These are the Bokoblins, or the Goombas of Genshin Impact. They are the most iconic enemy we have, and like, you can't really hate them. I mean, they're boring, they don't do anything special, but they're cool, you know? You gotta love them. They're at least going up in A tier for that. But speaking of special, we got Hilichurl Rogues up next, and they are anything but boring. These two Hilichurl are two of the coolest looking enemies they've created. You get to see regular Hilichurl use slimes as tools, like in bombs and stuff, and they throw them at you, but these two really take it to the next level and use slimes in very unique ways. My only real complaint about them is that the Animo one just kind of doesn't like to group up very much, so it can be kind of annoying in the Spiral Abyss, but other than that, these are A tier enemies. Mitochurls, also known as just large Hilichurls. There's nothing really special you can say about these guys, but they are exactly what they needed to be in the early game. There's a good variety in them with the axes and the shields, and even in those limited archetypes, they have pretty interesting attacks for what they are. Much like the Hilichurl, this one's gonna get bonus points just for being like old and iconic and just a consistently good enemy to have. And for that, they're gonna go up in the A tier as well. Geo Vishaps, literally everything I said about the Bathismal Vishap, same things go for these guys, so they're going in the B tier as well. Vishap Hatchlings, on the other hand, these guys, oh god, like enemies that spend a lot of time rolling around, running away from you, or burrowing underground, they can be very frustrating to fight. I'm only thankful that these guys don't show up in the Abyss really like ever. I honestly don't even really remember them being in there. They probably have been. But in any case, really cool design. Love the way they look. They're classic, I guess. But I'm still putting them down in D tier. Fungi. These little guys, they're adorable. Love them. The events have endeared us to them numerous times by now. They have an absolutely wonderful amount of variety. Their attacks are nothing special. And most importantly, unlike slimes and specters, they're not immune to their elements. They succeed everywhere specters fail, and I love them for that. So they're going in the B tier. Fatui, just the regular guys. You know, the gunners, the Animo Boxer, those guys. They have elemental shields that aren't overwhelmingly frustrating to deal with because you can still deal damage to their health bars just at a greatly reduced rate. The thing is I love the Fatui Animo Boxer, and the Cryo Gunner ain't so bad either, but the Geo and Pyro Gunners really bring this whole category down. More importantly, those seem to be the ones that get used in the Spiral Abyss the most. Their mechanics overall aren't anything super impressive, and I don't usually enjoy fighting them that much. They're just kind of like inoffensive, so I'm going to put them in C tier. Now for the newest Fatui edition, the Fatui Operatives. Much like the Hilichurl Rogues, I do believe these enemies brought a breath of fresh air to a previously kind of stale group of enemies. I certainly don't think they innovated as much as the Hilichurl Rogues did, given how much differently the Rogues are from regular Hilichurl, but the Fatui Operatives still managed to have very interesting mechanics, including a healing reduction mechanic, which we didn't really have before. And given that we are being pushed more towards a healing meta thanks to characters like Farina and the rest of the Fontaine characters, they can prove to be pretty important, or they're just the mechanic they introduced. For that, I kind of like them a lot, so they can go up in A with the Hilichurl Rogues. Fatui Pyro Agent. Despite being one of the oldest enemies in the game, they still have a pretty cool mechanic with their stealth and their clones. Normally, enemies that stealth in games can be pretty frustrating, especially if they are truly invisible. However, Genshin gives you the ability to mark them with different elemental reactions, and that way you can actually see where they are. The first time you ever fought one of these guys and noticed that you could do that, you probably felt pretty good for doing it. Then you have their clones and their ultimate attack, and thanks to how fragile they are, you'll almost never see this in real gameplay unless you're trying to see it. Even so, it still remains to be one of the cooler attacks that an enemy has, and I would love to see a Spiral Abyss floor where they buffed up Fatui Pyro Agent, where the clones actually have HP and they more reasonably get this off. In any case, it's the B tier for them. If they had more health and they actually have to do their things more often, they'd be a lot better, as with most enemies. The Eremites. This covers a wide array of enemies. You got the basic ones that are basically just Treasure Hoarders 2.0. Then you got the ones that more commonly show up in the Abyss that summon little companions and stuff. I basically call it their Pokemon. In any case, I was too lazy to find footage of those, but pretty much everybody knows what I'm talking about. In any case, the Eremites are a pretty cool enemy type. Yeah, they may be similar to the Treasure Hoarders in a lot of ways, but I find in general the average Eremite is a lot more aggressive, and that makes them more enjoyable as an enemy type, and one of them doesn't have a freaking shovel and just throws dirt at you. In any case, it's a B tier for them. Okay. Crabs. Yeah, just the little crab enemies from Fontaine. I debated on not even including these because they just, like, they almost do nothing. I mean, the little ones literally do nothing. They just look adorable and you just slaughter them because we're monsters. But the big ones, they make a little bit of an effort to fight back. They don't really do much. They're just kind of cute. Obviously, I absolutely love the design of these enemies. They're really good additions of Fontaine, but as actual enemies to fight, they're pretty bad because of how little of a fight they put up. They should rip the local legend crabs out of the water and put them on land and make us fight those, because they'd probably do a lot better. But in any case, they're going down in D just because of very low difficulty, but I absolutely love these little guys. And I saved the best for last, Consecrated Beast. I would not be surprised if I pissed off a lot of people by saying this, but these are the best enemies in in all of Genshin Impact. Not only do these have some of the coolest designs out of every enemy, they also come in many different flavors: blueberry, strawberry, lettuce, deodorant stick. Seriously though, their attacks are some of the best in the game. Not only are they incredibly threatening, making you actually feel like you need to dodge something, but most importantly, they are very well telegraphed. You know how to dodge these things after seeing them maybe even once or twice. I genuinely do believe that they are the best designed enemies in all of Genshin Impact. However, I agree with people that they can be incredibly frustrating when they are fought in pairs, and God forbid if they ever go beyond that. A much better solution would just be to increase their health significantly and their damage, making it that much more important to dodge their very easily dodgeable attacks when you only need to focus on one of them. And that's a lot of words to just say they're going in S. I love these things. They're beautiful, they're fun. I want to see more enemies like this, and Fontaine has kind of been giving us that. Okay, so just to get ahead of a lot of comments that are probably coming, yeah, I excluded a lot of different enemies. No crocodiles, sumpter beasts. I even excluded things like the Eyes of the Storm from Mondstadt because they're barely even real enemies. And all the underwater Fontaine enemies, I know the seahorses, they've shown up in a couple like above ground areas and like ruins and stuff. They just haven't been around enough. I love those enemies though. I think they're great. Like they would be a solid A tier, maybe even S tier if we had more of them and they were more fleshed out. But there's a good chance if it wasn't on this list, I excluded it on purpose. And remember, this is my opinion, you know? We all have different things we value. I like difficult enemies that have very telegraphed attacks and are generally kind of dangerous. And I dislike enemies that try to avoid combat, are too easy, they're really passive and would make you wait 20 seconds just to get a counter or Beto, stuff like that. But I would love to hear your thoughts on it, especially around Consecrated Beasts, because so many people had a really salty opinion about them. And I wonder if since it's been a while since they've been in Spiral Abyss, if maybe you changed your mind. Have they grown on you? In any case, thank you to my members, my patrons, for supporting me as always. Thank you to you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Attaboy!